What they didn't want you to know about Adam and Eve. Few stories have shaped the moral and spiritual fabric of humanity like the biblical account of Adam and Eve. This ancient tale of innocence, temptation, and the fall of humanity has been retold for millennia, often regarded as the foundation of human history in Judeo-Christian tradition. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward story lies a web of untold mysteries, concealed truths, and interpretations that challenge everything we thought we knew. Why has this story been simplified to the point of reducing Adam and Eve to mere archetypes of sin and punishment? What if there were more to the story? Details deliberately hidden, altered, or suppressed for centuries. By exploring alternative perspectives and suppressed interpretations, we uncover a narrative far richer and more complex than traditional readings suggest. These hidden dimensions reveal profound insights into human nature, free will, and spiritual growth, unraveling the deeper significance of the Genesis account. Brace yourself. This journey through hidden history, theology, and symbolism is as dramatic as it is transformative. If you find these ideas intriguing, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content and share your perspective in the comments below. We'd love to hear your insights. 1. Historical suppression of alternative interpretations. The story of Adam and Eve, as presented in the book of Genesis, has undergone a long history of interpretation marked by an initial diversity of thought, followed by centuries of theological consolidation. Early Jewish and Christian traditions explored this foundational narrative with remarkable nuance, far removed from the rigid, literal interpretations often promoted today. In early Jewish thought, the Genesis account was not confined to a single meaning. Rabbinic literature, including the Midrash, offered intricate commentaries that delved into the symbolic and allegorical dimensions of the text. For instance, the serpent was sometimes seen not merely as a deceiver but as a complex figure representing human desire or the duality of free will. Adam and Eve's expulsion from Eden was interpreted as a necessary step toward humanity's moral development, highlighting the potential for growth rather than solely focusing on punishment. Christianity inherited this rich interpretive tradition and expanded upon it. Early Christian Gnostics, a diverse and often controversial group within the nascent faith, presented a radically different perspective on the Genesis narrative. For them, the serpent in the Garden of Eden was not a villain, but a liberator, a bringer of divine knowledge, gnosis, that freed Adam and Eve from the ignorance imposed by the demiurge, a lesser god who created the material world. In this reading, eating the forbidden fruit was not a transgression, but an act of awakening, a pivotal moment that enabled humanity to strive for higher spiritual understanding. These interpretations reveal the plurality of early views surrounding Genesis, demonstrating that the story was far from a monolithic account of sin and punishment. However, as Christianity evolved into an institutional religion, this diversity came under increasing scrutiny. Theological debates in the early centuries of the Church saw the emergence of an orthodox interpretation that sought to unify doctrine under a singular narrative. By the 4th century, figures like Augustine of Hippo played a central role in cementing a particular understanding of Genesis. Augustine's doctrine of original sin, rooted in his reading of Adam and Eve's disobedience, became the cornerstone of Christian anthropology. He argued that humanity inherited a sinful nature from Adam and Eve, necessitating divine grace and salvation through Christ. This interpretation served as the theological basis for condemning alternative readings of the story. Church councils and early Christian leaders labeled divergent views, such as those of the Gnostics, as heretical. Texts espousing alternative perspectives were often banned or destroyed, erasing much of the intellectual diversity that once characterized early Christianity. The suppression of these voices ensured that Augustine's interpretation, which emphasized human depravity and the necessity of ecclesiastical mediation, became the dominant narrative. The suppression of alternative interpretations was deeply intertwined with religious and political power dynamics. The Adam and Eve story became a potent tool for reinforcing hierarchical systems of authority, both within the Church and in broader society. By portraying humanity as inherently sinful and in need of salvation, the Church positioned itself as the exclusive mediator between God and humanity. This theological framework justified the Church's authority and the obedience it demanded from its followers. Questioning this narrative was not just a theological matter, it was a direct challenge to the institution's power. The implications of this interpretation extended beyond the Church to societal structures, particularly in reinforcing patriarchy. Eve's role in the narrative, as the first to be tempted and the one who led Adam into sin, was weaponized to justify the subjugation of women. For centuries, women were excluded from leadership roles within religious institutions, their voices silenced in theological and societal discourse. Eve became a symbol of female weakness and susceptibility, a characterization that served to perpetuate systems of male dominance. But was Eve truly to blame? Or was her portrayal shaped to serve an agenda that sought to control women and suppress their agency? The political motivations behind the Orthodox reading of Genesis also extended to broader societal power structures. A literal reading of the story casts humanity as stewards of a fallen world, tasked with obedience to both divine and earthly authority. This perspective discourages questioning the natural order of power, wealth, and social hierarchy. If humanity's primary role is to atone for sin and accept its fallen nature, then resistance to existing systems of authority may be seen as futile or even blasphemous. However, alternative interpretations of Genesis suggest a more empowering message. What if the narrative is not about passive submission to a divinely ordained hierarchy, but about reclaiming the divine potential lost in the garden? The Gnostic view, for instance, reframes the expulsion from Eden as the beginning of humanity's journey toward self-realization and spiritual enlightenment. Rather than viewing the forbidden fruit as a symbol of sin, it could be seen as a representation of the human capacity for knowledge and transformation. The consolidation of a singular orthodox interpretation of Genesis was not merely a matter of theological preference, it was a deliberate strategy for maintaining control over religious and social life. By suppressing alternative readings, the Church ensured that the Adam and Eve narrative served its institutional goals. The story became a tool for enforcing obedience, perpetuating inequality, and discouraging dissent. Yet, the buried diversity of interpretations invites us to re-examine the Genesis account with fresh eyes. What lessons might emerge if we approach the story not as a fixed doctrine, but as a dynamic text open to multiple readings? Could it inspire a vision of humanity that emphasizes potential and growth over guilt and submission? By revisiting these suppressed perspectives, we may uncover deeper truths about the story of Adam and Eve, and about ourselves. 2. Religious and political motives for hiding certain details. The story of Adam and Eve is rich with symbols whose meanings have been reinterpreted and manipulated over centuries to serve specific religious and political agendas. The serpent, the tree of knowledge, and even the roles of Adam and Eve have been reframed in ways that emphasize human guilt, obedience, and dependence on institutional authority, often obscuring deeper, more empowering meanings within the text. One of the most enduring symbols in the Adam and Eve narrative is the serpent. In mainstream Christian theology, the serpent is equated with Satan, the ultimate deceiver who led humanity astray. However, this interpretation is not inherent in the text of Genesis itself. Nowhere in the original account is the serpent explicitly identified as Satan. This association emerged later, particularly in Christian theology, as part of a broader narrative of cosmic struggle between good and evil. In many ancient cultures, serpents symbolized wisdom, transformation, and eternal life. In Mesopotamian mythology, the serpent often served as a symbol of healing and regeneration. Even within the Bible, the serpent assumes complex roles. For instance, Moses lifted a bronze serpent in the wilderness as a symbol of divine healing. Numbers 21, 8-9. Could it be that the serpent in Eden represents a force of enlightenment rather than pure evil? Gnostic interpretations certainly thought so, viewing the serpent as a bringer of knowledge who offered Adam and Eve the opportunity to awaken from ignorance and understand their divine potential. Reframing the serpent as a figure of enlightenment, rather than deception, poses a challenge to the orthodox interpretation. It suggests that the quest for knowledge, even at great cost, is a noble endeavor, a theme that runs counter to the traditional emphasis on obedience and submission. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is another central symbol in the narrative, often portrayed as a dangerous and forbidden source of wisdom. The conventional interpretation suggests that God placed the tree in Eden as a test of Adam and Eve's obedience, framing their consumption of its fruit as an act of rebellion. However, this raises a profound theological question. Why would an omniscient and benevolent God create such a tree if its fruit was not meant to be eaten? Why place it within reach if it was solely intended to bring ruin? Alternative interpretations propose that the tree was not a trap, but a divine gift, symbolizing the knowledge necessary for humanity's moral and spiritual growth. In this view, eating the fruit was not a catastrophic failure, but an inevitable and even essential step in human development. The idea that the tree represents the maturation of humanity aligns with broader themes in the Genesis narrative. By consuming the fruit, Adam and Eve gained self-awareness. They recognized their nakedness and became capable of making moral choices. This newfound awareness, while accompanied by suffering, also brought the potential for creativity, responsibility, and progress. Rather than condemning Adam and Eve for their choice, this interpretation views their act as a bold step toward independence and self-realization. Mainstream interpretations often depict Adam and Eve as passive characters, naive individuals manipulated by the serpent and punished by God. However, alternative readings challenge this characterization, suggesting that Adam and Eve were active participants in a cosmic drama of choice and consequence. Their decision to eat the fruit was not merely an act of disobedience, but a deliberate choice to pursue knowledge and autonomy. Consider the implications of this perspective. If Adam and Eve are seen not as weak-willed victims, but as courageous seekers of truth, the entire narrative shifts. The fall becomes a moment of growth, where humanity takes its first steps toward spiritual maturity. This interpretation challenges the traditional doctrine of original sin, which emphasizes humanity's inherent depravity and dependence on divine salvation. Instead, it presents Adam and Eve as the architects of their destiny, flawed, yet brave and aspirational. This reframing has significant theological and political implications. If Adam and Eve are viewed as heroes rather than villains, it undermines the Church's monopoly on spiritual authority. Suddenly, the story of Eden is not about humanity's failure, but about its potential. It becomes a narrative of empowerment, encouraging individuals to seek knowledge, embrace responsibility, and challenge oppressive structures. The idea of Adam and Eve as empowered figures poses a direct challenge to hierarchical systems of control. The traditional interpretation, which emphasizes their guilt and the need for salvation, reinforces the Church's role as the mediator of grace. However, if humanity's fall is also its first step toward freedom, individuals might be inspired to seek spiritual truths outside institutional boundaries. This prospect was deeply threatening to the early Church, which sought to maintain its authority by promoting a singular, dogmatic reading of Genesis. The reinterpretation of symbols in the Genesis story was not purely theological, it was also deeply political. The framing of the serpent as a deceiver, the tree as a dangerous source of forbidden knowledge, and Adam and Eve as weak-willed transgressors served to justify systems of authority that demanded obedience. By portraying humanity as inherently sinful and prone to error, the narrative discouraged individuals from questioning religious or political hierarchies. The story reinforced the idea that knowledge and autonomy come at a dangerous price, deterring challenges to established power structures. The specific vilification of Eve also played a crucial role in reinforcing patriarchy. By casting her as the instigator of humanity's downfall, the story was used to justify the subjugation of women. Eve's actions became a cautionary tale, warning against female independence and agency. This interpretation supported centuries of exclusionary practices that barred women from leadership roles within religious institutions and diminished their voices in public life. Unpacking these manipulated symbols allows us to recover the hidden richness of the Genesis narrative. What if the serpent represents wisdom? The tree embodies the potential for human growth, and Adam and Eve are seen as bold pioneers rather than condemned sinners. Such interpretations open the door to a more empowering understanding of the story, one that celebrates humanity's capacity for learning, choice, and transformation. By revisiting these suppressed meanings, we can challenge the dogmatic interpretations that have long been used to control and constrain. Instead of a narrative of guilt and punishment, the story of Adam and Eve can become a profound exploration of human potential, offering a vision of growth, courage, and the pursuit of truth. 3. Uncovering the true meaning behind the story. The story of Adam and Eve is one of the most enduring narratives in human history. Yet its true meaning has often been overshadowed by centuries of dogmatic interpretation. Far from being a tale of humanity's inherent depravity and original sin, the Genesis account can be read as a profound exploration of human potential, the journey of the soul, and the responsible exercise of free will. By re-examining this story with fresh eyes, we uncover a narrative that inspires growth, empowerment, and spiritual awakening. One of the most compelling reinterpretations of the Adam and Eve story centers on the concept of original potential rather than original sin. In Genesis 3:5, the serpent tells Eve, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil." When Adam and Eve eat the fruit, they gain a new awareness, a divine trait that sets them apart from other creatures. This act, while often interpreted as disobedience, also represents a significant moment of transformation. By choosing knowledge, Adam and Eve stepped into their role as beings capable of moral discernment, creativity, and self-awareness. This perspective challenges the traditional notion that their exile from Eden was purely punitive. Instead, their departure can be seen as a necessary transition. The boundaries of the garden, idyllic as it was, could not contain their growing potential. the act of leaving Eden marked the beginning of their journey as co-creators with God, tasked with shaping the world and forging their destiny. From this angle, the story is less about humanity's fall and more about its rise, a coming-of-age tale where Adam and Eve embrace the complexity of existence. The concept of knowing good and evil is central to this reinterpretation. It suggests a shift from innocence to experience, a transformation that aligns humanity more closely with the divine image in which they were created. Genesis 1:27. Rather than being a curse, this newfound knowledge equips humanity to navigate the challenges of life with wisdom and purpose. Another layer of meaning emerges when we view the Garden of Eden as an allegory for the human soul. Mystical traditions across religions, such as Kabbalistic Judaism, Christian mysticism, and Sufism, have long interpreted the garden as a symbol of the soul's original state, pure, harmonious, and in perfect union with the divine. In this state, humanity existed in a condition of spiritual innocence, free from the dualities of good and evil. The act of eating the forbidden fruit, in this context, represents the soul's descent into duality and separation. This is not a condemnation, but a necessary stage in the soul's journey. Just as Adam and Eve moved from innocence to knowledge, the soul must descend into the material world to experience growth, transformation, and eventual reunion with the divine. This perspective reframes the fall as a purposeful descent rather than a catastrophic failure. The trials and tribulations of the material world become opportunities for learning and refinement. Through struggle and suffering, humanity gains the wisdom and spiritual maturity needed to ascend to a higher state of being. In this view, the story of Eden is not one of loss, but of progression, a narrative of the soul's journey from unity to separation and back to unity. The imagery of the garden also evokes themes of inner cultivation. Just as Adam was tasked with tending the garden, we are called to cultivate the garden of our own souls. This involves nurturing our spiritual growth, weeding out harmful tendencies, and sowing seeds of virtue and wisdom. The Garden of Eden thus serves as a timeless metaphor for the spiritual work required to maintain harmony within ourselves and our relationship with the divine. At the heart of the Adam and Eve story lies the profound theme of free will. The decision to eat the fruit highlights the tension between obedience and autonomy, a tension that resonates deeply with modern readers. Unlike other creatures in the garden, Adam and Eve were endowed with the capacity to choose. This gift of free will is what makes humanity unique, but it also introduces the possibility of error. Traditional interpretations often emphasize the consequences of Adam and Eve's choice, portraying their disobedience as a cautionary tale about the dangers of defying divine authority. However, an alternative reading suggests that their choice to eat the fruit was an essential exercise of free will, a demonstration of their autonomy and their willingness to embrace the unknown. Free will is what makes moral growth possible. Without the ability to choose, there can be no true virtue, only mechanical obedience. Adam and Eve's decision, while fraught with consequences, reflects their capacity to act as moral agents. It is through their choice that humanity embarks on its journey of learning and growth, encountering both the joys and challenges of freedom. This interpretation reframes the lesson of Genesis. Rather than teaching blind submission to authority, the story invites us to consider the responsible exercise of free will. How do we balance the freedom to choose with the wisdom to choose well? How do we navigate the complexities of life with integrity and purpose? These questions, embedded in the Genesis narrative, remain profoundly relevant today. Ultimately, the The story of Adam and Eve is not just about a moment in the distant past. It is about the ongoing human experience. It speaks to our capacity for growth, our longing for knowledge, and our struggle to balance freedom with responsibility. Far from being a tale of condemnation, it is a story of empowerment, inviting us to embrace our potential as beings created in the image of God. By eating the fruit, Adam and Eve took a bold step into the unknown. Their journey mirrors our own, a journey of self-discovery, spiritual growth, and the quest for meaning. When we move beyond fear-based interpretations, the Genesis narrative becomes a source of inspiration, a reminder that even in the face of challenges, we have the capacity to grow, to learn, and to create. In this light, the story of Eden is not a tragedy, but a triumph, a celebration of humanity's divine potential. 4. How this knowledge changes our understanding. The story of Adam and Eve has long been wielded as a tool of control, its deeper meanings obscured by centuries of religious and political manipulation. However, by revisiting the narrative with fresh eyes, we uncover a tale of empowerment, self-discovery, and the profound complexity of human existence. Adam and Eve are not merely the first sinners, they are archetypes of human courage, curiosity, and the eternal quest for knowledge. The serpent is not simply a villain, but a symbol of transformation, a catalyst for awakening and growth. The Garden of Eden is not a utopia irretrievably lost, but a pivotal stage in humanity's spiritual evolution, marking the transition from innocence to experience. Understanding these hidden truths has the power to transform our perspective. It challenges us to question the narratives we've inherited and to seek the divine potential within ourselves. It invites us to see the story not as one of condemnation, but as a celebration of the human spirit's capacity for growth, resilience, and self-realization. This reinterpretation calls us to reclaim the knowledge and freedom that were never truly lost, only misunderstood. It reframes the fall not as humanity's failure, but as its rise toward autonomy, wisdom, and creativity. What they didn't want you to know about Adam and Eve is that their story is, ultimately, your story, a journey of choice, growth, and redemption. It is an invitation to embrace the challenges and opportunities of life as part of the human experience. It's time to rewrite the narrative and embrace the deeper truths that have been waiting to be rediscovered.